Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Beavis and Butthead Do America from 1996. And this is the winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Beavis and Butthead Do America is sort of like a typical TV show to movie kind of film in that it wants to, have a bigger budget, do a bigger adventure, do something they could never do in the TV show. And most of the times when you do that, you get like a crazy pan of like the old town they live in that they could never have done in the show, or, something that's like blowing the world up that doesn't really feel appropriate, doesn't really feel like the show necessarily. And most of the time, I think that's like sort of, like a bad thing. You get like the Jetsons movie or the Simpsons movie or something where it's like it's fine, but it doesn't feel as much like the show, and it's not necessarily something you want to watch as much as the show. And Beavis and Butthead Do America seems to somehow do that, but is also highly watchable. I think there's people who have definitely seen this film who've never seen an episode of Beavis and Butthead, or maybe seen like just one, and seen this movie multiple times, particularly since it got played on MTV incessantly in the 90s and the 2000s, partly because they had the rights to it and stuff. I think one of the smart things that this movie does is get rid of the TV like almost right away, so that they aren't hanging out in their house watching TV. They have a reason to leave their small town and go off and go on this adventure and be walking around to kind of get wrapped up into, this kind of big, espionage, kind of like secret military weapon kind of movie, which is a cool way to take Beavis and Butthead, because it kind of works in the idea that all these people are taking this very seriously and think they're these masterminds and all this stuff. And instead they're just like Beavis and Butthead, like laughing at a donkey pooping. It adds to the silliness of the whole thing because the juxtaposition to the two is pretty hilarious. And to have like a more serious plotline that you've seen in like countless movies, that's usually like this more serious political thriller thing, which was totally something that happened in the 90s, with a comedy at the same time, kind of makes it a lot more enjoyable, I think. It's kind of like something that takes itself very seriously, and you as an audience are like, yeah, I've seen this before, I don't know how serious I actually take this. And to have characters who are actually not taking this plotline as serious or as intelligent as it certainly perceives to be makes it a lot more fun. I like how this film does that. I mean, it does work in a way where if you like Beavis and Butthead, you can enjoy this film, but if you don't really know Beavis and Butthead at all, you can also enjoy this movie. It doesn't do too many excessive action sequences. This is pretty to the point and to the point of the script and the plot, with the exception of the sequence early on that opens the movie of them as giant kaiju, and then it cuts to them waking up, or Beavis waking up, or somebody wakes up, and then they realize their TV's gone, and then they have a blaxploitation sequence like with Isaac Hayes music for no reason. And then the rest of the movie is like pretty tightly scripted. If there's like kind of wasted moments, they're wasted of, oh, how did they get from this place to this place, and what happened between it, what happened at the Hoover Dam, how did they get into this mess, how did they keep escalating this situation that could potentially, destroy millions. I'm kind of surprised at how they kind of like get those kind of silly things out of their system, which might have just been in there because this movie's like pretty short. It's 81 minutes, which is like still to this day, like even for an animated film, is pretty damn short. So those might have just been in there because they're like, we can't have this, has to be over 80 minutes, so it's 81. So that might have actually been why. But I really like those sequences. It kind of like gets it out of its system in such a fun, weird way, because they're kind of like, they really have nothing to do with the rest of the movie or anything. They're just like fun, actiony things that you could probably put in the trailers, which I saw quite a bit. This was Mike Judge's feature film debut, and it's his only animated film, believe it or not, the others being Office Space, Idiocracy, and Extract. Beavis and Butthead and the movie gets that it's a joke, but the rest of the people aren't in on the joke. And the guy who did the music of this, John Frizzell, who actually was mentored by the guy who did the music of Airplane, told him, when you do the music, you can't be in on the joke. I think that gives the movie this kind of cool quality to it, because so many comedies like the Farrelly Brothers were getting bigger and bigger. David Spade, Chris Farley stuff, and the Adam Sandler stuff were played, very much as comedies. And this was played, it's kind of in the Airplane vein. I mean, I hear Airplane brought up a lot, and obviously Robert Stack is in both, playing, very straight in both of them. Robert Stack's like has a scene with, the married couple who are also voiced by Demi Moore and Bruce Willis. That's not played for laughs. That's played as a serious thing. So it's like, it's very different from what Airplane did, which Airplane is full out parody from top to bottom. This is very different from a comedy, and I don't think there's a lot of films that can really pull it off as well as Beavis and Butthead do. It's just that Beavis and Butthead are obviously like the comedic foils to it, and you don't have the rest of, their cast of characters, so you kind of have to introduce new people. And that might sound like something that would normally be horrible. I don't know how he wrote this so well, but he also had such great actors in it. Demi Moore and Bruce Willis, who did like no press for this movie. So I actually it took me years to go like, holy shit, that's them. I had magazines of this. I remember watching the MTV behind the scenes. I didn't get to see this in theaters because I was like too young. I did see it on video and again on MTV like a million times. I mean, it's pretty obvious once you know it's them, but I think it's cool because they were like such a big celebrity couple at the time that they would actually want to do Beavis and Butthead Do America. And this was before animated films would be like stacked top to bottom with famous voices. And this does actually have a lot of famous voices. It has Cloris Leachman as the old lady, which I didn't realize until doing this review. It has obviously Robert Stack, but then Robert Stack's ATF agent Bork is actually voiced by Greg Kinnear, which I didn't know. Richard Linklater is actually the tour bus driver, and David Letterman as well, who's Butthead's dad, but he was uncredited. He was credited as I think as his Uncle Earl's name, which he thought was funny. They make such good use of this, but they don't call to mind it. Like, he clearly casts people, like, if you're going to cast people for voices, if you're going to cast in general, you shouldn't just cast big names. For the sake of it, you should cast names that are appropriate for it. That's why like something like The Incredibles works so well, because they got the right people for each of those roles. No one's really asking Sarah Val. I think they are actually, but Sarah Val wasn't a choice that most people were going to choose for big mainstream movies, but she works really well for that character. And Mike Judge did such a good job that honestly, most 90s kids, if you were around at the time, didn't know any of these people except for Robert Stack. I think was the person they bring up the most in behind the scenes stuff. I didn't know about Cloris Leachman, or maybe they mentioned it and I totally blocked it or something. I didn't know about Greg Kinnear, but they're so I never knew about Greg Kinnear. I didn't know about Greg Kinnear until after I watched the movie and go, holy shit, that Greg Kinnear? Oh my god. But it fits so well, and that's how you should be casting. I think that leads to how well this movie worked on itself. It kind of, I don't want to act like if you cut out Beavis and Butthead, there'd be this cool alternative cut where you have this interesting kind of 90s espionage thriller thing, which I don't agree with. I think you have both work juxtaposed to one another, taking one out. The Beavis and Butthead parts probably work, but the other part is kind of you need it there. It's you don't have mustard by yourself unless you're a fucking weirdo. So you kind of, but mustard works really well in a sandwich. So I think that that works within this movie, those two sides together. And I've always liked this film because it plays like a good road movie. You can have a foil, a comedic foil, real comic characters, making fun of it and making these obvious jokes. And I remember having this on all the time incessantly throughout the 90s and people just absolutely loving it. I knew everyone who had seen this movie, and most saw it on home video, although it was successful. It did actually open number one at the box office. It overtook Jerry Maguire in its second weekend and had the biggest December opening of all time at the time, which was 20 million, which isn't that crazy, especially compared to now. And that record would eventually be broken a year later by Scream 2, and then a week later after that by Titanic, but whatever. But it's still, hey, for a year, Beavis and Butthead had a box office record. And it did well. It only cost 12 million, made about 63. And it really, I think, is able to kind of transition the Beavis and Butthead characters cinematically. It's almost so much of a different thing. I wouldn't say it's very representative of the show. The South Park movie, I feel sort of stays more within the show than the Beavis and Butthead movie does. The Beavis and Butthead movie is seriously its own fucking thing. They would never really do anything like this ever again. And then they went back to a show, and certainly they had more camera angles and stuff because they've gotten more money. But for the most part, Beavis and Butthead is more a straight ahead, medium shot, kind of wide shot type of show. And this let them play around more with that, but it didn't feel so over the top and excessive in a lot of ways, which kind of shows how much control Mike Judge has as a director. It feels like this big, excessive, big movie type of thing, but it almost sort of doesn't feel as big and as wide as those things would do. He doesn't go as stylized as maybe he could have. He's not necessarily specifically referencing any specific film, unless I'm totally wrong on that, but I never really felt that shrouded. It's not a specific movie parody, it's more of a general movie parody, but it's kind of so general you kind of accept it, and it feels like a movie you'd end up watching on a Saturday afternoon, on the couch because you were bored, which is probably why this movie played so well incessantly over and over again. And it was kind of a surprise surprising film because there weren't a lot of more adult animated films at the time. This is 1996. The 90s weren't really known for adult animated films, but it's kind of cool Beavis and Butthead could break through. Generally, it got well reviewed and everything like that. And then Mike Judge could move on and start working on King of the Hill and Beavis and Butthead as well. And Daria would happen after that, who has like a really brief cameo in this. I'm kind of glad this is the only film of Beavis and Butthead. I mean, I don't want it to be like Cheech and Chong, where like Cheech and Chong first couple movies are really funny and then it kind of like wears out its welcome really quickly. I forget how many movies there are, but there's like a lot of not great ones. I like that this is Beavis and Butthead's kind of cinematic achievement is Beavis and Butthead Do America. It's this very silly, like kind of fun, very watchable type of movie that really understands the theory of itself. Mike Judge is, when he's at his best, really understands the kind of material that he's working with and understands his characters and how to use those characters. Particularly like, you know, TV is more character based and he was able to really bring that over. People I don't think thought that about him at the time. King of the Hill had yet to have happened, although it happened pretty soon after. Like, he understands those characters and how to get them to work within this kind of ridiculous road trip type of thing. And it actually might be one of my favorite road trip movies. I've seen it so many times because of TV. I rented it a lot before TV overplayed it too. So I've seen this movie so many times. It really felt like just watching an old friend. I knew the Beavis and Butthead cartoon really well before I had seen the movie. I was a big fan of Beavis and Butthead a lot. It was like Beavis and Butthead and Ren and Stimpy were like two of my favorite cartoon shows. I always put them together, but stylistically they're so different. I think it was just like things that angered parents is why I put them together, but I still like them now. I think this plays into like that you look down on them, that you think Beavis and Butthead are stupid, and this like kind of plays into it rather than against it. It's not like making Beavis and Butthead look smarter or anything like that. It's making everyone else can do a smarter thing and act like they're doing this serious thing and stopping this biological weapon thing, which is frankly ridiculous. But Beavis and Butthead can still be stupid, and you can second guess them, and it totally works because you're like, oh, those two have it, you know, and you think how dumb they are, and it works within everything that the movie's working towards. It kind of doesn't play against what you already think of them, and it doesn't play too hard into the fire or frog baseball kind of years. It kind of like is able to evolve the characters while also like not evolving them at all. You don't get the music video things, which is why the Rob Zombie sort of sequence, which isn't directed by Rob Zombie, that's like kind of a urban legend, just some of his designs. It's directed by Chris Prosaic, I think, who directed Nerdland and would do stuff like with Metalocalypse and Downtown. It's a cool sequence, but they wanted some music video thing in it. There's no way this would have felt like so incredibly dated. Beavis and Butthead was able to kind of keep its soul while fighting against all sorts of studio notes. Like, hey, what if we make it live action? What if we do this? Like, maybe we should get different voices for the millions of people that, you know, Mike Judge does voices for and things like that. They were able to kind of keep it Beavis and Butthead and keep it Mike Judge and keep the kind of soul of this thing, which is actually like really fucking important, while also kind of changing it for the big screen. With Beavis and Butthead Do America, I think it is it's funny, it's sort of a funny, silly movie that has a lot of smart things going on and have to have had an importance of script, which the script written by Joe Stillman, who would actually end up co-writing the first two Shrek movies, were able to understand that you really can't have a lot of wasted moments in this. And if you have wasted moments, there needs to almost be an excuse to have them. And so like, it might seem like a silly plot. I mean, it's also, I think the one thing that works about this silly plot and why it works so well on TV and continues to work well on TV, because I think it always gets played, is that you could leave, go to the bathroom and come back and understand what's going on. And that's not like a criticism of the film, because you want this to have this like looser sort of TV vibe. You don't want it to be too big and too important. Beavis and Butthead managed to kind of like pretend to be important while also not being important, which is a delicate act to follow. You know, for most people, I think this was, because I remember talking to people at the time and they thought this was the end of Beavis and Butthead. And if this was the end, it was kind of like a natural, beautiful sort of way to end it. And in a way, like, you don't even need to have seen this movie if you like the show, because they come back, they get their TV, and life returns to normal. It feels like such a fitting way to end Beavis and Butthead Do America. You know, it doesn't feel like a weak cop-out where you're like, oh, nothing changed, of course. Like, that naturally works within it. And I think that's one thing, you know, I have brought up the character thing with this movie a lot, and that how Mike Judge knows his characters, but he also knows the natural flow of the show and natural flow of things from an audience, and how to not make you go, oh, that's fucking weak. Like, you seriously, I thought everything was going to change. You should have stuck with it. But in this, it's sort of all feel sort of natural, but he does so many unusual things within it. It's actually a pretty genius film, because there's so many films that try to do the serious thing with these comedic foils, and it never works as well. Like, seriously, there's very few films that do it as well as having like Bruce Willis and Demi Moore and Robert Stack in this one plot line, and they're still doing funny things like body cavity searches and all sorts of things like that, but they're able to be serious and funny. It's just a very interesting line that they walk on, and they never quite fall off of it. I think Beavis and Butthead Do America ends up being one of the better transitions from animated TV show to animated movie, probably right up there with the South Park film. But this is kind of more of the end, whereas the South Park movie was a major transition for the show into becoming more satirical and things like that. Beavis and Butthead Do America was kind of like a fitting conclusion of all these people and of these characters, and pushing them almost as far as they could go, and kind of almost at the end of their cultural relevance. But it was kind of a nice finale, even though there was actually a finale later. But this was honestly most of the last thing most people have seen of Beavis and Butthead, and I think it is a fitting conclusion. It's a fitting conclusion because, you know, regardless if the show is going to go on or not, that Beavis and Butthead would sit around and make stupid jokes and talk about hoping to score and watch TV. This was just kind of a weird side avenue, but it's such an enjoyable, well done side avenue that you're happy to go on it and almost imagine this side avenue almost as much as you enjoyed the show. So if you have seen Beavis and Butthead Do America and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this is a winner of my Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Thank you very much for watching.